Throughout human history, royalty and nobility have held positions of immense influence, shaping the course of empires and civilizations. Within these elite circles, the desire to preserve power, wealth, and status was paramount, and marriage was one of the most powerful tools to achieve this. However, this intense focus on maintaining dynastic continuity often led to a practice that had far-reaching consequences: inbreeding. By marrying close relatives, royal families sought to safeguard their bloodlines and consolidate their wealth and influence. But while this practice achieved short-term political stability, it came with significant biological costs. Nowhere is this more evident than in the tragic fates of many royal houses, where genetic defects, diseases, and infertility plagued successive generations. The curse of the gods, the price of pure blood. The concept of divinity and kingship in ancient Egypt was deeply intertwined. Pharaohs were not merely rulers or political figures, they were regarded as living gods, embodiments of divine power on earth. Central to this belief was the pharaoh's status as the direct descendant of the sun god Ra, as well as other deities such as Horus and Osiris. The divine nature of the pharaoh's rule was the cornerstone of Egyptian society, and it shaped not only the political landscape, but also the cultural, religious, and familial practices of the royal family. To preserve this divine status, Egyptian royalty practiced a unique form of inbreeding, brother-sister marriages. These unions, while unusual by modern standards, were seen as vital in maintaining the purity of the royal bloodline, which in turn reinforced the pharaoh's claim to divine authority. The pharaoh was considered a god in human form, and as such, any dilution of the bloodline through marriage to commoners or foreigners was perceived as a threat to the divine order. By marrying within the family, the pharaohs aimed to keep their bloodline, and by extension, their connection to the gods, intact. Marriages within the royal family were therefore not just a matter of personal or dynastic preference, but were seen as a religious necessity. Brother-sister marriages were modeled after the gods themselves, particularly the myth of Osiris and Isis, who were siblings as well as husband and wife. By emulating the gods, the pharaohs reinforced their divine status, ensuring that their lineage remained untainted by the common blood of non-royal families. One of the most famous examples of inbreeding among the Egyptian pharaohs is Tutankhamun, often referred to as King Tut. His life, reign, and death have captivated historians, archaeologists, and the public alike, particularly following the discovery of his tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter. However, recent genetic studies have shed new light on the genetic consequences of inbreeding within the Egyptian royal family, with King Tut becoming the most well-known victim of these practices. Tutankhamun was born around 1341 BCE during the late 18th dynasty, a period marked by great political and religious upheaval. His father, Pharaoh Akhenaten, is famous for his radical attempt to shift Egyptian religion towards monotheism, worshipping a single god, the Aten, the sun disk. Akhenaten's rule was controversial and destabilized much of Egypt's traditional religious structure. Akhenaten's personal life was equally significant in shaping the future of Egypt. However, his personal life was also shaped by the traditional practice of royal inbreeding. Akhenaten married his sister Nefertiti, as was customary among the royal family, and their union produced Tutankhamun. Nefertiti was one of the most powerful and influential queens of ancient Egypt, and together they ruled during a period of great upheaval. Their union was seen as a divine bond, a reflection of the gods Osiris and Isis, who were also married siblings. This was part of a long-standing tradition within the 18th dynasty, in which the royal family practiced inbreeding to maintain the purity of the bloodline. Genetic analysis conducted in the early 21st century revealed that Tutankhamun was the product of a brother-sister marriage, which contributed to a number of significant health problems. Tutankhamun's physical condition has been the subject of intense study, and modern DNA testing has confirmed that he suffered from a variety of ailments, including a cleft palate, clubfoot, and other skeletal deformities. Additionally, evidence suggests that he may have suffered from malaria and other infectious diseases, which further weakened his already fragile health. These genetic defects were almost certainly the result of the inbreeding that had occurred within the royal family for generations. Tutankhamun's reign was short, lasting only about 10 years. He ascended to the throne as a child, around the age of 9, and died at approximately 19. His early death has often been attributed to his health problems, which were exacerbated by the genetic consequences of his inbreeding. Despite his relatively brief reign, Tutankhamun's legacy has endured, largely due to the discovery of his remarkably intact tomb, which provided invaluable insight into the life and death of Egypt's pharaohs. Inbred to rule, the genetic gamble of Habsburg. Among the royal families of Europe, few dynasties have wielded as much power and influence as the Habsburgs. Their rule stretched across the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, Austria, and much of Central Europe for centuries, making them one of the most formidable families in European history. But the Habsburgs were not just known for their political prowess, they also became infamous for their extreme inbreeding, which resulted in severe genetic consequences that eventually contributed to their downfall. The Habsburgs' obsession with dynastic purity was driven by a desire to secure their political grip on Europe, maintain vast territories, and avoid external claims to their throne. However, the biological costs of this inbreeding became evident over time, with severe physical deformities, mental health issues, and infertility plaguing many members of the family. The Habsburg jaw, or mandibular prognathism, is perhaps the most infamous example of the genetic consequences of royal inbreeding. This condition is characterized by an overgrown lower jaw, causing the teeth to misalign and the chin to protrude forward. Over generations, this deformity became more severe, affecting both the physical appearance and health of many members of the Habsburg family. The origin of the Habsburg jaw can be traced back to the marriage patterns of the family, which involved numerous unions between close relatives. The condition is believed to have first appeared in the early generations of the Habsburgs, but it became more pronounced as successive generations continued to intermarry. By the time of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, the Habsburg jaw was already a noticeable trait, but it worsened in later generations, particularly in the Spanish Habsburg line. The facial deformity became so associated with the family that it was not only a physical marker of their lineage, but also a subject of mockery and satire. The Habsburg jaw was often exaggerated in portraits and cartoons, becoming a symbol of the dynasty's degeneration. However, the condition was not merely a cosmetic issue, it also had significant health implications. Many members of the Habsburg family experienced difficulties with speech and eating due to the misalignment of their teeth and jaws, and the condition was often accompanied by other physical and mental health problems. The Habsburg jaw is a prime example of the genetic consequences of inbreeding, particularly in cases where recessive traits are passed down through multiple generations. As the Habsburgs continued to marry within their own family, the likelihood of these recessive traits becoming more pronounced increased, leading to the severe deformities and health issues that came to define the family. One of the most tragic examples of the consequences of inbreeding in the Habsburg dynasty is Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg king of Spain. Charles II's reign is often cited as a case study in the dangers of royal inbreeding, as he suffered from numerous physical, mental, and reproductive disabilities that were a direct result of his family's long history of intermarriage. Charles II was born into a family that had already experienced generations of inbreeding, and his family tree was more of a family web, with close relatives marrying each other to preserve the Habsburg bloodline. His parents, Philip IV of Spain and Mariana of Austria, were uncle and niece, a common practice among the Habsburgs to maintain dynastic continuity and prevent external claims to the throne. However, the genetic toll of such close familial marriages was evident in Charles's health from birth. Physically, Charles was frail and sickly. He was described as having an abnormally large head and jaw, the result of the Habsburg jaw, which made it difficult for him to speak and chew. His tongue was so enlarged that it reportedly affected his ability to communicate. Charles also suffered from severe digestive issues, and his body was often described as weak and emaciated. He was unable to walk until the age of 4 and struggled with mobility throughout his life. Mentally, Charles was often characterized as intellectually disabled. He was said to have the mind of a child, even as an adult, and was unable to engage in complex political or military matters. His cognitive impairments were so severe that many contemporaries questioned his ability to rule, and his reign was largely controlled by advisors and regents who acted in his place. Perhaps most significant was Charles's inability to father an heir. Despite being married twice, first to Marie-Louise of Orléans and later to Maria Anna of Neuburg, Charles was unable to produce any children, a fact that led to the extinction of the Spanish Habsburg line. His sterility was widely attributed to the inbreeding that had plagued his family for generations. When Charles II of Spain died, the autopsy stated that his body did not contain a single drop of blood. His heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotten and gangrenous. He had a single testicle, black as coal, and his head was full of water. Charles II's death in 1700 marked the end of the Spanish Habsburgs and set the stage for the War of Spanish Succession, a major conflict that reshaped the political landscape of Europe. Without a clear heir, the question of who would succeed Charles II on the Spanish throne became a matter of intense dispute among the major European powers. The war that followed resulted in significant territorial shifts and the rise of new dynastic powers, such as the Bourbons in Spain. The war ended in 1714 with the Treaty of Utrecht, which resulted in significant territorial changes across Europe. The Bourbons were recognized as the new ruling dynasty of Spain, marking the end of Habsburg rule in the country. The Habsburgs of Austria, meanwhile, retained control over parts of their empire, but lost their grip on Spain and its colonies. This marked a turning point in European history, as the Bourbon dynasty rose to prominence, while the Habsburgs' influence began to wane. The War of Spanish Succession was not the only conflict sparked by Habsburg inbreeding. Throughout the 16th and 17th centuries, the Habsburgs were involved in numerous wars and disputes over succession, many of which were complicated by the family's complex web of intermarriages. The Habsburgs' practice of marrying close relatives often led to disputes over inheritance, as multiple branches of the family laid claim to the same territories. This contributed to a series of conflicts that destabilized Europe and reshaped its political boundaries. The physical and mental decline of the Habsburg rulers weakened the family's ability to govern effectively, leading to increased reliance on advisors and regents. In many cases, these advisors wielded significant power, as the ruling Habsburgs were often unable to fulfill their duties due to their health problems. This led to political instability within the empire, as rival factions vied for influence over the weak rulers. While the genetic consequences of inbreeding are clear in hindsight, the Habsburgs' adherence to this practice was driven by powerful political motivations. For the Habsburgs, maintaining control over their vast empire, which spanned much of Europe, required a delicate balance of power. However, while these political motivations were successful in maintaining Habsburg power in the short term, they ultimately came at a significant biological cost, leading to the end of the Spanish line of the Habsburg dynasty. Price of purity, the curse of royal bloodlines. Hemophilia, a rare genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly, has long been associated with European royalty and has become known as the royal disease due to its prevalence. The disease leads to excessive bleeding, as the blood lacks the necessary clotting factors to heal wounds effectively, making even minor injuries potentially fatal. The spread of haemophilia among European royal families can be traced back to Queen Victoria, one of the most influential monarchs of the 19th century. Queen Victoria was a carrier of the X-linked recessive gene that causes haemophilia. This genetic condition is passed down through the maternal line, as the gene responsible for haemophilia is located on the X chromosome. Women, who have two X chromosomes, can carry the gene without suffering from the disorder, while men, who have only one X chromosome, are more likely to develop the disease if they inherit the defective gene. Victoria had 9 children, many of whom married into other European royal families, spreading the haemophilia gene across the continent. 3 of her children, Alice, Leopold, and Beatrice, passed the gene to their descendants, ensuring that the disorder became a fixture in multiple royal houses. While Queen Victoria herself was not affected by haemophilia, her son, Prince Leopold, Duke of Albany, was one of the first members of the British royal family to be diagnosed with the disease. Leopold's condition became apparent at a young age, as he suffered from frequent bleeding episodes and had to be closely monitored throughout his life. Tragically, Leopold died at the age of 30 after suffering a fall that triggered uncontrollable bleeding, a direct consequence of his haemophilia. His early death was a blow to the British royal family and highlighted the dangers of the disorder, which would continue to plague his descendants and other European royal families. Queen Victoria's children and grandchildren formed a network of intermarried European royal families, and through these unions, the gene for haemophilia spread across the continent. One of the most tragic cases of haemophilia in European royalty is that of Alexei Nikolaevich Romanov, the youngest child and only son of Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and Empress Alexandra Feodorovna. Alexandra, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, inherited the haemophilia gene from her mother, Princess Alice of the United Kingdom, who was one of Victoria's daughters. When Alexei was born in 1904, he was the long-awaited male heir to the Russian throne. However, it soon became apparent that Alexei suffered from haemophilia, a condition that would not only shape his life, but also have far-reaching consequences for the Romanov dynasty and the fate of the Russian Empire. Alexei's haemophilia was severe, and his condition required constant monitoring and care. Even a small bruise or cut could result in life-threatening bleeding, and there were frequent episodes where Alexei's life hung in the balance. His illness caused immense anxiety for his mother, Empress Alexandra, who became deeply involved in finding a cure for her son. This desperation led Alexandra to place her trust in Grigory Rasputin, a mystic and self-proclaimed holy man who claimed to have the ability to heal Alexei. Rasputin's influence over the Romanov family grew as a result of his perceived success in alleviating Alexei's symptoms, though modern medical historians believe that his interventions likely had a placebo effect rather than any actual medical benefit. Nevertheless, Rasputin's growing presence at the Russian court caused widespread scandal and contributed to the erosion of public confidence in the Romanovs. Many in the Russian aristocracy and broader society saw Rasputin as a corrupting influence on the royal family, and his proximity to the Romanovs was one of the many factors that fueled discontent with the monarchy. As Russia faced increasing political turmoil with the rise of revolutionary movements and dissatisfaction with the Tsar's rule, Rasputin's role in the royal household became a lightning rod for criticism. His influence over Alexandra in particular was seen as a sign of the Romanovs' detachment from the realities of the Russian people's suffering. The combination of Alexei's illness, Rasputin's controversial role at court, and the political instability of Russia during World War I set the stage for the eventual collapse of the Romanov dynasty. The Russian Revolution of 1917 brought an end to the Romanov monarchy, and Tsar Nicholas II, Empress Alexandra, and their children, including Alexei, were imprisoned and eventually executed by the Bolsheviks in 1918. Alexei's haemophilia had been a source of deep concern for the Romanovs throughout their final years, and while the disorder was not directly responsible for the fall of the empire, it played a significant role in shaping the family's decisions and the public's perception of the monarchy. The Spanish royal family also became affected by haemophilia through Queen Victoria's descendants. One of Victoria's daughters, Princess Beatrice, married Prince Henry of Battenberg, and their daughter, Victoria Eugenie of Battenberg, inherited the haemophilia gene. Victoria Eugenie, known as Ina, married King Alfonso XIII of Spain in 1906, bringing the gene for haemophilia into the Spanish royal line. The marriage between Ina and Alfonso was politically advantageous, as it solidified ties between the British and Spanish royal families. However, it also brought with it the risk of passing haemophilia to their offspring. The couple had 7 children, 2 of whom, Alfonso, Prince of Asturias, and Infante Gonzalo, were affected by haemophilia. Alfonso, the eldest son and heir to the Spanish throne, was diagnosed with haemophilia as a child. His condition caused significant concern for the Spanish royal family, as Alfonso's health was precarious and he was at constant risk of injury. Despite his illness, Alfonso led a relatively active life, but his haemophilia ultimately led to his untimely death in 1938. He suffered severe internal bleeding following a car accident, which doctors were unable to stop due to his haemophilia. His death was a significant loss for the Spanish royal family, as he had been the heir apparent and the hope for the continuation of the Bourbon dynasty in Spain. Infante Gonzalo, Alfonso's younger brother, was also affected by haemophilia. Like his brother, Gonzalo faced a series of health challenges throughout his life due to his condition. He died in 1934 at the age of 19, following complications from a car accident that caused internal bleeding, similar to the accident that would later claim his brother Alfonso's life. The German nobility was not immune to the spread of haemophilia either, as the disorder also affected branches of the Hohenzollern family, which ruled the Kingdom of Prussia and later the German Empire. Queen Victoria's daughters, Alice and Beatrice, both carried the haemophilia gene, and through their marriages into German noble families, the disease entered the German royal bloodlines. Princess Alice's daughter, Princess Irene of Hesse and by Rhine, married Prince Henry of Prussia, a member of the Hohenzollern dynasty. Irene, who was a carrier of the haemophilia gene, passed the disorder to her 2 sons, Prince Waldemar of Prussia and Prince Heinrich of Prussia. Both Waldemar and Heinrich suffered from the disease, and their health issues highlighted the challenges faced by the German nobility in managing the genetic risks associated with royal intermarriage. Prince Waldemar, in particular, lived with haemophilia throughout his life and had to avoid any activities that could result in injury. Despite the precautions taken to protect him, Waldemar's haemophilia led to his death in 1945, when he was unable to access the necessary medical treatment during the final days of World War II. His death marked another tragic chapter in the history of haemophilia among European royalty. Power, wealth, inbreeding. The banking dynasty bound by blood. The Rothschild family, one of the most powerful and influential banking dynasties in history, rose to prominence in Europe in the late 18th and 19th centuries. Founded by Meyer Amschel Rothschild, a Jewish banker from Frankfurt, Germany, the family grew from humble beginnings into a financial empire that spanned multiple countries. By establishing branches of the family in key financial capitals across Europe, including London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt, the Rothschilds created a network that dominated international banking and finance throughout the 19th century. While the Rothschilds were not royalty, their influence on the political and economic landscape of Europe was comparable to that of many royal dynasties. The family's power was rooted in its vast wealth, which was carefully guarded and strategically managed to ensure that it remained concentrated within the family. One of the key ways in which the Rothschilds preserved their wealth and maintained control over their financial empire was through a practice common among many elite families of the time: intra-family marriages. Marrying cousins and other close relatives was a practice used by the Rothschilds to keep their fortune within the family and avoid the dispersion of wealth through marriage into other families.
In our family, we've always tried to keep love in the family. In this sense, it was more or less understood since childhood that children would never think of marrying outside the family, so that our fortune would never leave it. You couldn't write that today.
This approach, while ensuring financial consolidation, also raised concerns about the potential genetic risks associated with inbreeding. However, for the Rothschilds, the preservation of wealth and power was paramount, and cousin marriages became a hallmark of the family's strategy for maintaining their financial dominance. Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the patriarch of the Rothschild dynasty, born in 1744, Frankfurt, Germany, began his career as a moneylender and currency trader in one of the Jewish ghettos of Frankfurt. Over time, he developed relationships with powerful clients, including members of the European aristocracy, and became known for his skill in managing financial transactions. Meyer Rothschild's success in finance allowed him to accumulate wealth, which he sought to pass down to his 5 sons, Amschel, Salomon, Nathan, Karl, and James. Recognizing the importance of keeping the family's fortune intact, Meyer Rothschild implemented a strategy of dividing his wealth among his sons, each of whom was sent to a different European financial center to establish branches of the Rothschild Bank. This strategy allowed the Rothschilds to create a vast network of banking operations that extended across Europe, with each son managing a key financial hub: Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, and James in Paris. Meyer Rothschild's foresight in establishing this network ensured that the family's wealth and influence would grow rapidly in the years that followed. However, he also understood the importance of keeping the family's assets consolidated and under Rothschild control. To achieve this, Meyer Rothschild is said to have encouraged marriages between close relatives, particularly cousins, to prevent the family's wealth from being diluted through alliances with other families. While it is unclear whether Meyer Rothschild explicitly mandated cousin marriages, the practice became a defining feature of the Rothschild family in the generations that followed. The practice of cousin marriages, while often viewed with skepticism today, was relatively common among European aristocrats, royalty, and wealthy families in the 19th century. Many European royal families, including the Habsburgs, Bourbons, and Windsors, also engaged in cousin marriages to consolidate power and prevent external claims to their thrones. Similarly, other wealthy families, such as the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, followed similar practices in the United States to preserve their fortunes. For the Rothschilds, who were navigating both the world of finance and the often insular Jewish communities of Europe, cousin marriages served several practical purposes. In addition to preserving wealth, these marriages helped maintain the family's social and cultural identity, particularly at a time when Jews in Europe faced significant legal and social restrictions. By marrying within the family, the Rothschilds could ensure that their Jewish heritage and traditions were passed down through the generations, while also avoiding the complications of intermarriage with non-Jewish families. However, cousin marriages were not without their risks. Inbreeding, particularly over multiple generations, can lead to an increased likelihood of genetic disorders and inherited health problems. While there is little evidence to suggest that the Rothschilds experienced significant genetic issues as a result of their cousin marriages, the potential risks of inbreeding were always present. In later generations, the Rothschilds began to marry outside the family more frequently, reducing the risks associated with inbreeding and expanding the family's social and political connections. Today, the Rothschild family remains one of the most prominent banking dynasties in the world, with a legacy that spans centuries. The practice of cousin marriages, while no longer common within the family, was an essential part of their strategy for maintaining their wealth and influence during the height of their power.